So this is a list of human traits, a chart. And on one side here, it shows the list of dominant traits. Okay, and here we have a list of recessive traits. So here are the list of our traits here. We have dimples, ability to roll tongue, length of the eyelashes, a widow's peak, earlobes, cleft in chin, hair on the middle joints of fingers, can wiggle ears, hitchhiker's thumb, and little finger. Now, in those lists of traits, it tells you which are dominant and which are recessive. When we were talking in class today, we discussed the fact that dominant traits means the stronger of the two genes. It's going to mask the effect of the other gene. So that means it's going to take over that fact. So you receive one gene for each trait from each parent. You receive one trait, one gene from mom, one gene from dad. We don't know if it's going to be dominant or recessive, right? Until you're born and we see which one you come out with. So now that we're looking at our list, what they're talking about, and we'll discuss more detail when we read along this week, each trait is either going to be dominant or recessive. So if you do have dimples, that is a dominant trait. Absent, you do not have dimples, that's a recessive trait. If you can roll your tongue, that is a dominant trait. If you cannot, then it is recessive. So as you can see going along this list, it gives you each and every one tells us whether it's dominant or recessive. So if you have long eyelashes, then that is a dominant trait. Short is recessive. A widow's peak, so you see that little indent in the top of the head, right, kind of comes to the middle like a little curve. If you do have one, that's a widow's peak, and that is a dominant trait. If you have a straight line across your hairline, it's straight over, that's recessive. Earlobes, if they are free, okay, then we consider that a dominant trait. If they are attached, then it is recessive. We'll talk more about that in class during the week. Notice the bottom part here, right? The earlobe, the bottom section is much different on this one bottom than this one. Cleft in chin. So kind of look at the chin here, right? Kind of has like that little indent. It kind of goes in, then it comes back out. Absent, if it's smooth going across, right, then that's going to be recessive. You have that chin here that kind of goes in, then comes out, then that's a cleft in chin. Hair on middle joints on fingers. Okay, so if you have, look at this hand here, if you have some hair on the section of your hands, look at your hands. If you can see some hair there, that is a dominant trait. No hair, then that's a recessive trait if it's absent. Think if you're absent from school, you're not there. So it's no hair is recessive. If you can wiggle your ears, and so some students have always go, yeah, and they just touch their ears and start wiggling them. We don't mean that. We just mean the fact that if you can just sit there and look at whoever else is in the room and just make your ears wiggle all on their own, right? Then that means if you can do that, and the answer is yes, I can make my ears wiggle all by myself without using my hands or any other part of my body, just wiggling them around, then that is a recessive trait. If you cannot, then that's a no, that is a dominant trait. Hitchhiker's thumb. If you put your thumb up, like you're giving me a thumbs up like you do in class a lot, I'm sure, for Zoom nowadays, if it's a straight thumb, right, and it goes straight up and down, then you do not have a hitchhiker's thumb. No, it just goes straight. If it curves like this one, then yes, you do have a hitchhiker's thumb, and that is considered a recessive trait. And the last one we're going to discuss is the bent little finger. So if you put your hand straight out and kind of look at your hands in front of you, and if that pinky finger is bent a little bit, right, and it's not directly attached to the others, kind of bends, then that is considered a dominant trait compared to a straight finger here, right? They're all together. They don't have to force them together. Then that is a recessive trait. So I would leave this list up as you complete your next assignment. So when you go into Google Classroom, you're going to see a worksheet that will ask you to answer some questions based on the chart. So you're going to use this trait to answer this worksheet here. Is it dominant or recessive? Okay, so you'll fill out your name, of course. Then it's going to ask you some questions. Are present dimples dominant or recessive? Go back to your chart. Dimples, if they are present, that means that it is a dominant trait. So you're going to go back to your worksheet. Are present dimples dominant or recessive? They are dominant. You're going to click here and move down. If you can roll your tongue, it is a blank trait. Is it recessive or is it dominant? If you can roll your tongue. You can roll your tongue. It is dominant. So you're going to go through each one. There's 10 questions. You're going to go through, make sure that you submit. Each one is required and it's worth 100 points. When you complete this, you will then have an ed puzzle to do on dominant traits. If you have any questions, please let me know in the chat.